For 22 years, my parents called me the fragile one. Not smart enough. Not strong enough. Not built for the kind of pressure our family name carried in Chicago. They said I wasn't meant to inherit anything. So at my sister's black tie engagement party, surrounded by investors, city officials, and 300 guests applauding her future, I was seated near the catering entrance, out of photographs, out of conversations, out of sight. And just when I decided to leave quietly, a man I had never seen before walked straight toward me, placed a sealed envelope in my hands, and said, "Your grandmother asked me to give you this the night your father proves who he really is." Inside that envelope was a clause no one knew about, a clause that gave me 72 hours to call an emergency board meeting. And if I did, control of our $120 million real estate empire would no longer belong to my father. They spent decades underestimating me. They never expected me to read the fine print. For 22 years, my parents called me fragile. Not to my face, of course. In public, I was described as sensitive, creative, better suited for something less intense. But behind closed doors, when investors weren't listening and cameras weren't pointed in our direction, the word they used was simpler: weak. My name is Aria Whitmore, and I grew up in a family that built skylines. Whitmore Urban Holdings shaped half of downtown Chicago, glass towers along the Loop, luxury condos near the lake, renovated industrial blocks on the south side that politicians proudly claimed as revitalization. My grandmother, Josephine Whitmore, built it from a single warehouse acquisition in 1964. She was 26 years old and the only woman in the room. She didn't ask for permission. She signed anyway. My father, Charles Whitmore, inherited her empire. My sister, Elise, inherited his confidence. And I inherited something else entirely. I was diagnosed with dyslexia at 8. Anxiety followed at 13. Panic attacks don't look dramatic in real life. They look like someone freezing in the middle of a sentence, like hands shaking while pretending to reach for water, like memorizing exits before entering rooms. My parents called it overreaction. Elise called it stage fright. Josephine called it intelligence moving too fast for its container. She sees patterns before she sees words, Grandma used to say when my father complained about my grades. That's not weakness, that's architecture. But architecture doesn't win board votes. Elise did. She was sharp, polished, effortless, Northwestern law, internships at top firms, comfortable under pressure the way some people are comfortable underwater. When she walked into rooms, people leaned forward. When I walked in, they waited for me to leave. The engagement party was Elise's moment. Black tie, Gold Coast Hotel ballroom. 300 guests, developers, aldermen, private equity partners. A quiet announcement disguised as a celebration. Elise would be stepping into an executive leadership role within Whitmore Urban Holdings. My father raised a champagne glass and spoke about legacy. "My eldest daughter represents the future of this company," he said, smiling proudly. "She understands what it takes. Understands what it takes." I was seated near the catering entrance, not at the family table, not near the stage, near the service corridor where waitstaff moved in and out unnoticed. My mother, Diana, adjusted the place card herself. "It's less overwhelming back here," she whispered, as if she were protecting me. I watched Elise glow under crystal chandeliers. I watched my father beam. I watched investors nod approvingly. And I told myself I wasn't surprised. Because I wasn't. When you grow up being gently redirected away from the center, you learn to live on the edge without questioning it. The applause rose like a wave, and that's when I felt it. The familiar tightening in my chest. The shift in air that signaled an incoming panic spiral. I excused myself before it fully hit. The hallway outside the ballroom was dim and quiet. I leaned against the wall, counting my breaths. Inhale 4, hold 4, exhale 4. Footsteps approached. Slow, deliberate. I looked up. A man in his early 60s stood a few feet away. Gray suit, calm eyes. The kind of composure that doesn't come from wealth, but from long practice. "Mrs. Whitmore?" he asked. "Yes. My name is Victor Langston. I represented your grandmother." My throat tightened. "She passed 3 years ago," I said. I know, he replied gently. She left specific instructions. He handed me a cream-colored envelope sealed in red wax. Tonight, he added. She said I would know when to give it to you. And I do. The music swelled from inside the ballroom. Applause again. My father's voice booming through speakers. What is it? I asked. Victor studied me carefully. A safeguard, he said, and a decision. I stared at the envelope. Through the open ballroom doors, I could see Elise laughing under chandeliers, my father resting a hand proudly on her shoulder. For 22 years, they had decided who I was. Fragile, unsuitable, unready. Victor lowered his voice slightly. Your grandmother believed you were the only one strong enough to use it. My pulse pounded in my ears. I took the envelope, and for the first time in my life, I felt something stronger than anxiety. I felt possibility. I didn't open the envelope in the hallway. I held it for a full minute, feeling the weight of the paper, the ridged edge of the wax seal pressed against my thumb. Inside the ballroom, my father's voice rose above the music. Elise has always understood what this company demands, he said. Strength, clarity, resilience. The applause was immediate. Resilience, I swallowed. Then I walked. Past the velvet curtains, past the mirrored columns, past the women in silk gowns and men in tailored suits who barely noticed me slip through the side exit. The night air outside the hotel hit my face like cold water. Chicago wind off the lake, sharp, honest. I stood beneath a streetlight and broke the seal. Inside were 3 documents, a letter, a legal instrument, and a second envelope marked, to be opened after reading. My hands trembled. Not from panic this time, but from something deeper. Anticipation. I unfolded the letter first. Josephine's handwriting. Firm, steady, slanted slightly forward like it was always moving. My dearest Aria, if you are reading this, then Charles has shown you who he truly intends to make invisible. My chest tightened. I built this company to outlive my fears. Your father inherited it and let his fears guide him. I refuse to let you be erased the way he tried to erase me. The words blurred. I blinked until they steadied. You are not fragile. You are perceptive. You see weaknesses in structures others mistake for strength. I pressed the paper against my chest. For years, I thought my anxiety meant I was defective, that my racing mind and spinning thoughts were proof I wasn't built for boardrooms or negotiation tables. But Josephine had never treated my panic attacks like shame. She used to sit with me on the floor when I couldn't breathe. Your body reacts because you care, she would say. Care is not weakness. It's awareness. I unfolded the second document, the legal instrument. I read slowly, carefully, the way she taught me. Revocation of prior testamentary documents. Majority equity transfer. 52% controlling shares of Whitmore Urban Holdings. Transferred to Area Whitmore. My name sat in the middle of the page like it had always belonged there. I read it again. Then again. 52%. Control. Voting authority. The valuation printed beside it made my pulse stutter. $120 million. I felt dizzy, not from panic but from gravity. Then I saw the clause. Clear, unforgiving. This bequest shall activate only upon formal petition for an emergency board session within 72 hours of delivery. Failure to do so shall render this instrument null and void. 72 hours. 3 days. The streetlight flickered above me. My mind started calculating automatically. Board members, alignments, loyalty. My father's temper. Elise's disbelief. My mother's silence. If I triggered this, there would be no going back. I opened the second envelope. Inside was a copy of board meeting minutes from 5 years earlier. Highlighted. My father's proposal. To reduce Josephine's voting power due to declining cognitive capacity. The vote had failed. By 1. I leaned back against the brick wall and let the truth settle. He hadn't just underestimated me. He had tried to remove her. The applause from inside the hotel rose again. Celebrating Elise. Celebrating succession. Celebrating a future that did not include me. For a moment, fear crept in. What if they were right? What if I wasn't built for this? What if panic swallowed me the second I stepped into that boardroom? Then I remembered Josephine's voice. You don't need to be fearless. You need to be willing. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Area, a calm voice said. It's Victor Langston. I assume you've read it. Yes, I whispered. The 72-hour clause? He asked. Yes. She insisted on it, he continued. She believed you would hesitate. The deadline isn't pressure. It's permission. Permission. To stop shrinking. To stop waiting for someone to validate me. To stop believing the seat near the service entrance was the only one I deserved. I looked back at the glowing ballroom windows. For 22 years, they decided what I could handle. They never once asked if I wanted the wait. Victor, I said slowly, what happens if I call that board meeting? A pause. Then the city learns something new about the Whitmore name, he replied. The wind lifted my hair, cold against my skin. 72 hours. That was all the time I had to decide whether I would remain the daughter they hid or become the woman they feared. And if you've ever stood outside a room where your future was being decided without you, then you already know what that choice feels like. I didn't go back inside the ballroom. I stood there until the music dulled into background noise and the cold air steadied my breathing. 72 hours. Most people would have called a lawyer first. I called a memory. I went home that night and pulled out the old leather notebook my grandmother gave me when I was 15. Inside were pages of diagrams, structures of deals she had once explained to me like blueprints. Circles and arrows, power flows, leverage points. Don't read people by what they say, she used to tell me. Read them by what they protect. I lay awake until nearly dawn, replaying the past. Not the glamorous parts. Not the gala dinners or ribbon cuttings. The small things. The time I froze during a school presentation and my father sighed loudly from the back of the auditorium. The way Elise squeezed my hand afterward, not in comfort, but in warning. The way my mother told guests, Aria prefers creative things, as if business required a different species of human. I learned early that survival meant observation. When anxiety made my heart race and my throat close, I would sit quietly and study the room. Who spoke? Who deferred? Who interrupted? I wasn't fragile. I was absorbing. By morning, I had 3 names written on the first page of a new notebook. Gloria Ramirez, Harold Bennett, Ethan Cole. 3 board members who had voted against reducing my grandmother's power 5 years ago. If I could secure 3 signatures requesting an emergency session, the clause would activate. I dressed carefully, not glamorous, not timid. Intentional. Whitmore Urban Holdings occupied the upper floors of a downtown tower overlooking the river. I had worked there for 4 years in community relations, a polite title for tasks that didn't involve decision-making. No one stopped me as I walked past the reception desk. They never did. Gloria Ramirez's office overlooked the south side. Blocks my grandmother had redeveloped when banks refused to finance female-led deals. Gloria had worked beside Josephine for 3 decades. She looked up when I entered. Aria, she said, surprised but not unkind. Shouldn't you be at the party? It's over, I replied. She studied my face. You look different. I am, I said. I placed the document on her desk. Her eyes scanned quickly, then more slowly. Then she leaned back. He tried to reduce her shares, she murmured. Yes, and this gives you majority control. Yes. Silence. Do you understand what this means? She asked. I understand that for the first time, I'm not asking to be included, I said. I'm asserting it. Gloria's gaze softened. Your grandmother once told me you see cracks before anyone else does, she said. She taught me to look. She signed. 1. I left her office shaking, not from panic, but from the magnitude of it. Next was Ethan Cole. He was younger, analytical, loyal to whoever protected stability. He frowned as he read. This will cause volatility, he said. So did attempting to silence Josephine, I replied. He met my eyes. Do you really want to fight your father publicly? I hesitated. Images flashed. My father's disappointment, my mother's fragile composure, Elise's polished smile. No, I admitted. But I want to stop fighting myself privately. That landed. He signed. 2. By the time I reached Harold Bennett's office, exhaustion crept into my bones. Panic hovered at the edges, breathing shallow, palms damp. Harold had been board chair for 12 years. He looked at the document, then at me. "Charles won't survive this quietly," he said. "I know. And you?" "I've survived being invisible," I replied. "Noise doesn't scare me." He studied me for a long moment. Then he said something I didn't expect. "Your father once told me you weren't built for this." I swallowed. "And what do you think?" I asked. He looked down at the signature lines. "I think he mistook silence for weakness." He signed. 3. I stepped back into the hallway and leaned against the wall. 3 signatures. The building felt the same. The city outside roared the same. But something fundamental had shifted. For 22 years, I waited to be chosen. In 72 hours, I had chosen myself. And for the first time, my anxiety didn't feel like a cage. It felt like energy. My father found out before I expected him to. He didn't call. He didn't text. He walked into my office. That alone told me everything. Charles Whitmore never came to the community relations wing unless there was a public appearance scheduled. He didn't visit the quieter floors where I worked. Those spaces were peripheral, useful, but not strategic. Until now. The glass door opened without a knock. I looked up from my desk and saw his reflection in the partition before I saw him directly. Controlled, perfectly tailored, eyes sharper than usual. "Arya," he said evenly, "we need to talk." People outside my office pretended not to notice. I stood. We didn't go to a conference room. He didn't offer that courtesy. He closed the door and remained standing. "You requested an emergency board session?" he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." He let out a breath through his nose, measured, almost amused. "You're being manipulated," he continued. "Victor Langston has always resented my leadership." "This wasn't Victor's idea," I replied. His jaw tightened slightly. "You don't understand the consequences of what you've triggered," he said. "Markets react, investors panic, reputation fractures." I met his gaze. "You tried to reduce Grandma's voting power," I said quietly. There it was. The shift. Not explosive. Just a subtle recalibration behind his eyes. "That was a strategic proposal," he said calmly. "She was aging." "She was lucid," I replied. "She recorded you." The silence that followed was heavier than any shouting could have been. His voice lowered. "You think you're strong enough to take this on?" "I think I'm tired of being told I'm not." He walked closer. "You had panic attacks in high school board simulations," he said softly. "You couldn't finish a single mock presentation without freezing." Heat rose in my chest, not from shame, but from memory. Yes, I froze. Because every time I stood to speak, I felt him watching, not supportively, but critically, measuring failure before I began. "I learned to manage them," I said. "You avoid pressure," he pressed. "I avoid humiliation," I corrected. That landed harder than I expected. For a fraction of a second, something flickered across his face. Not anger, recognition. The door opened abruptly. Elise stepped in without knocking. "What's going on?" she demanded. Her engagement ring caught the light as she crossed her arms. "You requested a board session?" she asked me directly. "Yes." Her expression hardened. "You're destabilizing everything." "I'm activating a legal instrument," I replied. She looked at our father. "Is it real?" Charles didn't answer immediately. That was answer enough. Elise turned back to me. "Do you know how long Dad has been preparing me for leadership?" she asked. "How many deals I've worked on? How many nights I've stayed in that building while you left early because it was too much?" I inhaled slowly. "You weren't staying because you loved it," I said. "You were staying because you were afraid not to." Her eyes flashed. "That's unfair." "Is it?" Silence. For years, Elise and I never confronted this directly. She played the golden child because it guaranteed survival. I played the invisible one because it reduced conflict. Now neither of us had protection. "You think this makes you qualified?" she asked. "No," I said honestly. "It makes me responsible." Charles stepped between us. "This meeting will not end well for you," he said quietly. "You're walking into a room built on leverage and loyalty." I nodded. "So are you." He stared at me for a long time. Then he said something unexpected. "You've always mistaken observation for strength." And you've mistaken control for security, I replied. The air felt electric. Outside my office, whispers had already begun. Board members were being notified. Emails were circulating. A vote would happen within 48 hours. My mother appeared in the doorway then. Diana, perfectly composed as always. "What are you doing?" she asked me softly. "Choosing," I said. She closed her eyes briefly. "You don't understand what this will cost us." "I understand what it's already cost me," I replied. For 22 years, I had shaped myself around their comfort, made myself smaller, spoke quieter, left earlier, sat near service doors. The board meeting wasn't the beginning of conflict. It was the end of compliance. Charles straightened his jacket. "If you go through with this," he said, "there is no return." I felt the familiar tremor in my hands, but it wasn't panic. It was momentum. "I know," I said. He studied me one last time, and for the first time in my life, I didn't see dismissal in his eyes. I saw calculation, because somewhere between the girl who froze in presentations and the woman who secured 3 signatures, something had changed, and he had finally noticed. The leak happened at 6:42 p.m. I was still in the office when my phone started vibrating across the desk. First a text from Ethan, then another from Gloria. Then 3 missed calls from an unknown number with a downtown area code. Finally, a headline notification flashed across my screen. Chicago Business Journal. Emergency board session at Whitmore Urban Holdings. Sparks leadership questions. It didn't name me. It didn't name my father. But it didn't need to. In Chicago real estate circles, speculation spreads faster than fact. By 7:15 p.m., investors were calling. By 8 o'clock, my father's executive assistant had canceled 3 meetings scheduled for the next morning. By 8:30, I received a message from Elise. "What have you done?" I didn't respond. I left the building through the side entrance and walked along the river until the cold air steadied my pulse. The city lights shimmered against the water, indifferent to legacy, power, or family reputations. My phone rang again. This time, it was my mother. "Come home," Diana said quietly. "Please." I hesitated. "I won't stay long," I replied. The house felt different when I walked in. Not grand. Tense. The staff had been dismissed early. The air smelled faintly of extinguished candles. Silence echoed in the hallway like something waiting to collapse. Diana was in the sitting room, still in the pale blue dress she'd worn to the engagement party. Her makeup was gone. Her composure wasn't. "You triggered the clause," she said. Yes. She didn't argue. Instead, she walked to a drawer and removed a thin folder. "I knew about it," she said. The words didn't register at first. "Knew about what?" I asked. "The draft," she whispered. "Your grandmother showed it to me 2 years before she died." My heart pounded. "You knew she was leaving majority control to me?" "Yes." "And you said nothing?" Her eyes filled. "Charles believed she would never formalize it," she said. "He convinced himself it was emotional, reactionary. And you?" I thought. She stopped, inhaled shakily. "I thought if Elise proved herself strong enough, your grandmother would reconsider." The room felt smaller. "You gambled my place in this family on her performance," I said quietly. "I thought I was protecting you," she whispered. "From what?" "From failure," she said. I almost laughed. "You didn't protect me," I said. "You preemptively removed me." Her composure finally cracked. "Do you know what it's like," she said, "to watch your husband and daughter move through a world that rewards aggression, and know your other child absorbs everything silently?" I blinked. "I was afraid," she continued. "Not of you. Of what would happen if you lost." "I was already losing," I replied. The truth sat between us. For years, she had mistaken my quiet for fragility. She hadn't seen the way I learned the board's voting patterns, the way I memorized deal structures, the way anxiety sharpened my perception instead of dulling it. "I should have told you," she admitted, when she showed me the draft. "Yes," I said. "I didn't think you would want it. I didn't know I was allowed to want it." That silenced her. The front door opened. Charles walked in, coat still on. He didn't look at me. "Press is circling," he said flatly. "They're calling it a succession dispute." "It is," I replied. He turned sharply. This company feeds hundreds of families, he said. You're destabilizing livelihoods. I'm activating governance, I corrected. Governance? He laughed bitterly. You've never sat through a hostile negotiation. No, I said calmly. I've just lived through one for 22 years. He stared at me. Diana stepped between us. She knows about the draft, she said. His eyes snapped to her. You told her? I didn't have to, she replied. She found it. The air crackled. For a moment, none of us spoke. Then Charles said something quieter than I expected. You think this makes you braver than us? No, I said. It just means I'm done being smaller. Outside, headlights flashed against the windows. The city was watching now. By midnight, speculation had doubled. Investors were requesting statements. The board meeting was confirmed for 9 a.m. As I left the house, my mother caught my hand. If you walk into that room tomorrow, she whispered, you won't be able to walk back out the same. I squeezed her fingers gently. I don't want to, I said, because the girl who needed protection had already survived. Tomorrow wasn't about proving I was strong. It was about proving I was never weak. The boardroom on the 42nd floor had no curtains. Floor-to-ceiling glass wrapped around the space, exposing the Chicago skyline in every direction. No shadows. No corners to retreat into. Josephine had designed it that way. Transparency makes liars uncomfortable, she once told me. At 8:52 a.m., I stepped out of the elevator. My heartbeat was steady. That surprised me. Anxiety had accompanied me into classrooms, interviews, even family dinners. But today, it wasn't spiraling. It was focused, narrowed into something sharp. Victor Langston was already inside, reviewing documents with Harold Bennett. Gloria Ramirez sat at the far end of the table, hands folded, calm as ever. Ethan avoided eye contact. Then the elevator doors opened again. Charles walked in first. Elise followed. My mother did not. Charles took the head seat automatically. No one corrected him. Not yet. At 9:01 a.m., Harold cleared his throat. This emergency session was formally requested under Article 7, he said. The matter concerns majority equity transfer. Charles leaned back, composed. There has been confusion, he said smoothly. A draft document is being misinterpreted. Victor stood. It is not a draft, he replied. It is notarized, executed, and legally binding. He placed the original will at the center of the table. The sound of paper on polished wood felt louder than it should have. Harold adjusted his glasses and read silently. The room was so quiet I could hear my own breathing. Then Charles spoke again. My mother was elderly when this was signed. Victor didn't blink. She recorded a board session 5 months prior, he said. Specifically one in which you proposed reducing her voting power. A ripple of tension moved around the table. Charles's jaw tightened. That recording was private, he said. It was legal, Victor replied. Harold looked up slowly. Is this accurate? He asked. Gloria nodded. Yes, she said calmly. The proposal failed by 1 vote. Charles's voice dropped lower. My mother misunderstood modern risk management. Your mother understood control, Gloria corrected. You tried to take it. Silence. Elise shifted in her seat. This is unnecessary, she said sharply. Even if the document is valid, Arya has no executive experience. Every eye turned toward me. There it was. The narrative I had lived inside for 2 decades. Fragile. Inexperienced. Unprepared. I stood. My palms were warm, but not shaking. I'm not asking to be CEO, I said evenly. Charles laughed once. Of course you aren't. I'm asking the board to evaluate leadership, I continued, without assumption. Harold leaned forward. Miss Whitmore, are you formally invoking majority rights? Yes. The word didn't echo. It anchored. Charles stood abruptly. You don't understand the fallout, he said. Investors are already nervous. They're nervous because they sense instability, I replied. Not because I'm here. He stared at me. You couldn't finish a presentation at 15 without freezing. I met his gaze. I can finish this one. The tension in the room shifted. Not loudly, but definitively. Victor slid a second document forward. Under Section 14.3, he said, the majority shareholder may call for a vote of confidence regarding executive leadership. Harold inhaled slowly. Charles's expression hardened. You would humiliate your own father publicly? No, I said. I would follow the bylaws you taught me to respect. That landed. For years he told me structure mattered. Process mattered. Governance mattered. Now I was using his language. Harold looked around the table. We will recess for 15 minutes to review the documentation. Board members stood. Conversations broke into low murmurs. Charles remained still. When the room emptied slightly, he looked at me. You think this proves you're strong? He said quietly. No, I replied. It proves I'm done hiding. He studied me, really studied me, for the first time in years. The girl who counted breaths in hallways. The daughter seated near catering doors. The child he tried to protect by excluding, or perhaps by controlling. When the board returned, Harold's tone was measured. The will is valid, he said. 52% majority control transfers to Aria Whitmore effective immediately. The skyline beyond the glass shimmered in the morning light. Transparent, unavoidable. Harold turned to me. Do you wish to bring forward a motion? My heartbeat slowed. This was the point of no return. I do, I said. I looked directly at my father. I call for a vote of confidence in the current CEO. The air in the room tightened. Some rooms were built to intimidate. Some rooms were built to expose. And sometimes, the only way to walk into one is to stop asking if you belong there. The room didn't erupt. There were no gasps, no dramatic protests. Just a stillness so complete it felt deliberate. A vote of confidence is not emotional. It is procedural. And procedure is merciless. Harold Bennett folded his hands on the table. The motion before the board, he said evenly, is a vote of confidence regarding Charles Whitmore's continued role as CEO of Whitmore Urban Holdings. My father didn't sit down. He remained standing at the head of the table, shoulders squared, expression carved from control. This is reckless, he said, a public spectacle disguised as governance. It's neither, Gloria replied calmly. It's accountability. Elise's voice cut through the tension. You're destabilizing a $120 million operation over a personal grievance, she said to me. This isn't personal, I answered. Her laugh was sharp. Of course it is. For years we avoided naming what existed between us. Competition, expectation, fear. Elise had been trained for this world from childhood. Groomed for leadership dinners, negotiation strategies, risk analysis sessions. I had been guided toward quieter paths. Public relations, community outreach, human-facing roles that kept me adjacent, but never central. She had been shaped into certainty. I had been shaped into caution. Now both of us were exposed. Harold spoke again. All those in favor of retaining Mr. Whitmore as CEO, please raise your hands. 4 hands rose immediately. Predictable. Men whose positions were secured through Charles's alliances. Individuals who equated continuity with safety. My father nodded once, controlled. Then Harold continued. All those opposed. Time stretched. 1 hand lifted. Gloria. Then another. Ethan. Then Harold himself. 3. My pulse thudded. Samuel Ortiz, quiet for most of the meeting, raised his hand next. 4. Across the table, Margaret Lee hesitated, then lifted hers slowly. 5. 2 more followed in steady succession. 6. 7. 7 hands. The air changed, not explosively, but permanently. Harold counted carefully. 7 opposed, 4 in favor, 1 abstention. Silence pressed in from every direction. The skyline beyond the glass looked almost indifferent. Charles remained standing. For a moment I thought he might argue, might challenge procedure, might question legality. Instead, he exhaled. Not defeated. Measured. This board, he said slowly, owes its growth to my leadership. This board owes its foundation to Josephine Whitmore, Gloria corrected. The truth hung heavy. Elise's composure finally cracked. You can't be serious, she said, looking around the table. Do you know what this does to market perception? It reinforces governance, Harold replied. Which markets prefer? Her eyes moved to me. You did this, she whispered. No, I said quietly. The bylaws did. Charles finally sat down. He looked at me differently now. Not dismissively, not critically. Assessing. You believe this makes you capable, he said softly. I believe it makes me responsible, I replied. Harold adjusted his papers. Under Section 14.3, Mr. Whitmore will have 30 days to tender his resignation. An interim CEO will be appointed pending a permanent decision. The finality in his voice left no room for reinterpretation. My father nodded once. Very well, he said. He stood. So did everyone else. The meeting wasn't dramatic. It was clinical. Power had shifted, not through shouting, but through counting. As board members filtered out, Samuel paused beside me. You were steadier than I expected, he said. I've had practice, I replied. In boardrooms? In silence. He studied me briefly, then nodded and left. Elise remained seated. Her engagement ring glinted under the morning light. They were preparing me, she said quietly, not looking at me. I know. I've structured my entire life around that expectation. I know. She swallowed hard. What am I supposed to be now? The question wasn't accusation. It was disorientation. For once, I said gently, you get to choose. Charles walked past us without speaking, but just before he reached the door, he stopped. Without turning around, he said, You didn't freeze. No praise. No warmth. Just acknowledgement. No, I replied. The door closed behind him. 7 hands. That was all it took. For 22 years, I believed strength meant not shaking. Today, I learned it meant standing anyway. And somewhere between the daughter they hid and the shareholder they couldn't ignore, I had stopped waiting to be invited. The room didn't erupt. There were no gasps, no dramatic protests. Just a stillness so complete it felt deliberate. A vote of confidence is not emotional. It is procedural. And procedure is merciless. Harold Bennett folded his hands on the table. The motion before the board, he said evenly, is a vote of confidence regarding Charles Whitmore's continued role as CEO of Whitmore Urban Holdings. My father didn't sit down. He remained standing at the head of the table, shoulders squared, expression carved from control. This is reckless, he said, a public spectacle disguised as governance. It's neither, Gloria replied calmly. It's accountability. Elise's voice cut through the tension. You're destabilizing a $120 million operation over a personal grievance, she said to me. This isn't personal, I answered. Her laugh was sharp. Of course it is. For years, we avoided naming what existed between us. Competition, expectation, fear. Elise had been trained for this world from childhood. Groomed for leadership dinners, negotiation strategies, risk analysis sessions. I had been guided toward quieter paths. Public relations, community outreach, human-facing roles that kept me adjacent, but never central. She had been shaped into certainty. I had been shaped into caution. Now both of us were exposed. Harold spoke again. All those in favor of retaining Mr. Whitmore as CEO, please raise your hands. 4 hands rose immediately. Predictable. Men whose positions were secured through Charles's alliances. Individuals who equated continuity with safety. My father nodded once, controlled. Then Harold continued. All those opposed. Time stretched. 1 hand lifted. Gloria. Then another. Ethan. Then Harold himself. 3. My pulse thudded. Samuel Ortiz, quiet for most of the meeting, raised his hand next. 4. Across the table, Margaret Lee hesitated, then lifted hers slowly. 5. 2 more followed in steady succession. 6. 7. 7 hands. The air changed. Not explosively, but permanently. Harold counted carefully. 7 opposed, 4 in favor, 1 abstention. Silence pressed in from every direction. The skyline beyond the glass looked almost indifferent. Charles remained standing. For a moment I thought he might argue, might challenge procedure, might question legality. Instead he exhaled, not defeated, measured. This board, he said slowly, owes its growth to my leadership. This board owes its foundation to Josephine Whitmore, Gloria corrected. The truth hung heavy. Elise's composure finally cracked. You can't be serious, she said, looking around the table. Do you know what this does to market perception? It reinforces governance, Harold replied. Which markets prefer? Her eyes moved to me. You did this, she whispered. No, I said quietly. The bylaws did. Charles finally sat down. He looked at me differently now, not dismissively, not critically. Assessing. You believe this makes you capable, he said softly. I believe it makes me responsible, I replied. Harold adjusted his papers. Under Section 14.3, Mr. Whitmore will have 30 days to tender his resignation. An interim CEO will be appointed pending a permanent decision. The finality in his voice left no room for reinterpretation. My father nodded once. Very well, he said. He stood. So did everyone else. The meeting wasn't dramatic. It was clinical. Power had shifted, not through shouting, but through counting. As board members filtered out, Samuel paused beside me. You were steadier than I expected, he said. I've had practice, I replied. In boardrooms? In silence. He studied me briefly, then nodded and left. Elise remained seated. Her engagement ring glinted under the morning light. They were preparing me, she said quietly, not looking at me. I know. I've structured my entire life around that expectation. I know. She swallowed hard. What am I supposed to be now? The question wasn't accusation. It was disorientation. For once, I said gently, you get to choose. Charles walked past us without speaking, but just before he reached the door, he stopped. Without turning around, he said, you didn't freeze. No praise, no warmth, just acknowledgement. No, I replied. The door closed behind him. 7 hands. That was all it took. For 22 years, I believed strength meant not shaking. Today, I learned it meant standing anyway. And somewhere between the daughter they hid and the shareholder they couldn't ignore, I had stopped waiting to be invited. He asked to see me alone. No lawyers, no board members, no press, just father and daughter. The meeting wasn't at the office. It was at the house. The same house where every holiday dinner had been staged like a performance, where achievements were toasted and weaknesses quietly redirected. I hadn't stepped inside since the vote. When I entered, the silence felt heavier than before. Not tense, just unfamiliar, like a place unsure of its hierarchy. Charles was in the study. No jacket, no tie, sleeves rolled slightly, though not carelessly. He looked older, not fragile, just aware. Close the door, he said. I did. He didn't offer me a seat, so I took one anyway. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The city hummed faintly outside the windows. You've stabilized the investors, he said finally. Yes, that was efficient. I learned from you. A flicker of something crossed his face. Approval, maybe, or irritation. You didn't freeze, he said again. No, he leaned back. When you were 14, he began, you had a panic attack before a mock trial presentation. You refused to step back into the classroom. I remembered it vividly. The fluorescent lights, the whispering classmates, his silhouette in the doorway. I wasn't refusing, I said quietly. I couldn't breathe. You walked away. I survived. Silence settled. He looked at me carefully. For years, I thought protecting you meant lowering expectations, he said. You weren't protecting me, I replied. You were protecting your image. His jaw tightened slightly. You were unpredictable under pressure, he said. I was unpredictable under judgment, I corrected. That landed, because it was true. My anxiety didn't flare in empty rooms. It flared when I felt measured and found lacking before I even began. You believe I underestimated you, he said. You did. He didn't deny it. Instead, he asked something I hadn't expected. Why didn't you fight earlier? The question wasn't accusatory. It was confused. I considered it carefully. Because I thought love meant compliance, I said. I thought if I made myself smaller, I'd be easier to accept. His expression shifted slightly. I never wanted you smaller, he said. You wanted me manageable. The word hung in the air. Manageable. Elise had been groomed. I had been contained. He stood and walked to the window. You think I didn't see your potential? He asked without turning. I think you saw risk, I replied. He turned back slowly. I saw volatility. I saw cracks. Silence. Different language for the same reality. He exhaled. When my mother built this company, she fought constantly. Banks, investors, city councils. I believed leadership required armor. And I don't? I asked. You wear it differently, he admitted. That was the closest he had ever come to understanding. For years, he mistook my observation for hesitation, my restraint for incapability, my quiet for weakness. You called me fragile, I said. I called you cautious, he corrected. You seated me near exits. That was your mother. You agreed. He didn't argue. Instead, he did something unexpected. He sat down. Across from me. Level. You didn't win because you're louder, he said. I know. You won because you waited. I shook my head gently. No, I said. I won because I stopped waiting. That shifted something. Not in the room, in him. You could have removed me entirely, he said. Yes. Why didn't you? Because I had asked myself that question already. Because revenge would have been simple. Because humiliation would have felt symmetrical. Because I don't want to lead through fear, I answered. He studied me carefully. Then, for the first time in my life, he said something without calculation. I was afraid, he admitted. I blinked. Of what? I asked. That if you failed publicly, he said quietly, it would destroy you. It wasn't the answer I expected. And if I succeeded? I asked. He paused. Then it would mean I was wrong. The honesty settled between us. For years, he had chosen certainty over possibility, chosen control over growth. I don't need you to admit you were wrong, I said. He looked at me. I need you to stop defining me. The room felt lighter somehow, not healed, but honest. He stood again. When I sign the resignation next week, he said, I won't contest it. I know. He nodded once. You're not fragile, he said quietly. No apology, no grand reconciliation, just recognition. For 22 years, that was all I wanted. But by the time he gave it, I realized something unexpected. I didn't need it anymore. I stood and walked toward the door. Arya, he said. I turned. You didn't inherit this company, he said. You earned it. I held his gaze. I inherited the right, I replied. I earned the voice. And for the first time in my life, I left that house without feeling smaller. Here is part moi. Koang bai tram moi words. Kep lai tran ven vong tran kao chuyen. Disantatsu Josephine Jelai. Va siti a anhen hang okoi. Part 10. What she actually left me. Charles signed the resignation papers on a Wednesday afternoon. No cameras, no announcement ceremony. Just signatures on heavy paper and a quiet acknowledgement from the board. Effective immediately, he would transition out within 30 days. Harold Bennett would serve as interim CEO while the board evaluated long-term leadership. I was present this time, not as a daughter. As majority shareholder, the pen didn't shake in his hand. Neither did mine. When it was done, he stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked out of the boardroom without theatrics. The glass walls reflected the skyline behind him, transparent, unyielding. And for the first time in my life, the room didn't feel intimidating. It felt earned. The weeks that followed were not dramatic. There were no corporate meltdowns, no hostile takeovers, no public scandals. There were meetings, strategy sessions, investor calls, conversations about long-term development in neighborhoods my grandmother once believed in before they were profitable. I proposed something new, a division focused on urban renewal partnerships, long-term, community-aligned projects instead of short-cycle profit flips. Gloria supported it immediately. Harold nodded thoughtfully. It aligns with Josephine's original charter, he said. That mattered. I didn't take the CEO seat. Not immediately. Instead, I accepted the role of Strategic Development Director, positioned where I could shape trajectory without inheriting ego. Elise surprised me. She stayed, not in the shadow of what she thought was hers, but in a new role she defined herself. We started having coffee on Saturdays, not to strategize, to understand. Turns out, she admitted once, stirring her drink absently, being the golden child isn't power, it's pressure. I nodded. And being the invisible one, I replied, isn't safety, it's silence. We were both relearning ourselves outside expectation. My mother began visiting my new apartment. Small, brick-walled, overlooking a quieter stretch of the city. No chandeliers, no seating charts. Just open windows and air that didn't feel curated. I should have told you about the draft, she said one evening. Yes, I replied. She nodded. I thought lowering expectations would spare you pain. It didn't, I said gently. It delayed strength. She didn't argue. She just listened. That alone felt like change. 6 months later, Chicago Business Journal ran a follow-up piece. Whitmore Urban Holdings reports. Stable growth under new governance structure. No scandal, no drama, just structure, stability. Josephine's portrait now hangs in the boardroom permanently, not at the head of the table, centered. When the light hits the glass just right in the late afternoon, it almost looks like she's watching. Sometimes I sit alone in that room after meetings end, not to admire control, to remember the girl who once memorized exit routes in banquet halls. The daughter seated near catering doors, the teenager who counted her breaths before speaking. I thought courage meant eliminating anxiety. It doesn't. It means acting while your heart is still racing. Josephine didn't leave me power. She left me permission. Permission to take up space. Permission to disagree. Permission to stop shrinking in rooms that benefited from my silence. My dyslexia didn't vanish. My anxiety didn't disappear. But neither define the ceiling anymore. They are simply parts of my architecture. Charles and I speak occasionally, not as adversaries, not as competitors, as two people who finally understand each other's language. He once told me quietly, I thought strength was dominance. I answered, I think it's endurance. Maybe we're both right. Or maybe strength evolves. When people ask how it feels to inherit a $120 million company, I tell them the truth. The money changed logistics. The control changed structure. But the real inheritance was internal. It was the moment I realized I didn't need anyone's permission to belong in the room. If you've followed this story from the beginning, maybe it's because you've stood outside a door before, wondering if you were strong enough to walk through it. Here's what I learned. The door rarely opens because someone invites you. It opens when you stop asking. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do isn't taking power. It's deciding you are never too fragile to hold it.